Oh. Okay, I guess I don't need to type that if you're here. That's so crazy. So yeah, I really want to talk to someone about my ideas regarding the periodic table of elements, and I think, Zach, I was swimming, thinking if there was anybody that I could talk to about this who would be maybe open-minded enough, it would be Zach, because I'm gonna buy your books. I'm out of the country right now, and my card's not working, and I hate buying shit online, but I want to buy your books and give them out, and you are inspiring me, and I'm starting to write, but I just need to like flesh out ideas about it, because I really think there's a lot to salt. Okay, so why do I think there's a lot to salt? So I'm just going to talk to you, Zach, if you're here. I hope you're still here. Either way, this is a good way for me to focus my conversation. When I met you at Flektoberfest in 2023, I came because, first of all, I wanted to see if the people that I was watching online were real people and it wasn't AI, and it was a fantastic experience. I was so happy and impressed, and it was incredible. The Flektoberfest. I encourage everyone to go this year. These are great people. I saw people that I really idolize in the most healthy way intellectually and the way they communicate, and I'm just overwhelmed. And one of the first person I met was Zach, and he greeted me at the table. And so my goal to talk about was salt, and how I believe that now we can neutralize the effects of metals by using salt. And I have a lot behind that. And it has to be pure salt. And I just would like to open it up to anyone who sees this video, that let's study together the periodic table of elements. I've got a lot of information. I'm also studying Chinese alchemy. I'm studying Dr. John Dee, and I can never say this right, Paracelsus. Anyway, the contemporary of him, and then the Bible. I'm big time into the Bible. And I really think that the fact that gems are not, as far as I know, gems are not mentioned much in the four Gospels. But that's what I'm going to be studying right now, because I think there's a relationship between the Francis Bacon translation, or version, because it's not a translation, it's a version, has really, it could be the great psyop in certain ways, but I love all Bibles. I love Bibles. I love Bibles. I love God. I have gotten so much knowledge from the Old Testament and the New Testament, but I just want to say I love Bibles. I just think that maybe the arrangement of the books, or the translations or versions of the books, may be different than what the original writer had in mind. Maybe. And that's just from my skepticism on translators. And I've worked as a translator on an international level for the U.S. government and for other important, so-called important groups. And I realized that that language is everything. And John 1:1 says it all, right? John 1:1. I have it here. I'd like to read it. All right. So this is a Schofield Bible, which is super interesting. If you don't know what a Schofield Bible is, it's really interesting. It's sort of like the guide for pastors post 1907. I can look. Okay. John 1:1. Here we go. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John chapter 1, verse 2. The same was in the beginning with God. I'm just going to continue. I'm going to read chapter 1. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness overcame it not. And I have my notes in here that is on my, I've been saying that for a while now, as I've started studying the Bible in 2021 pretty hard. But I really love this idea that in John 1:1, I'm trying to cover my gray hair. You don't see the roots, and you're distracted by my fake blonde, but it is blonde from the ocean too. Okay, so in the beginning was the Word. And one of my Bible buddies, is a Colombian electrical engineer, speaks English and now speaks Portuguese. And my buddy Boris, at one point said to me, the books Matthew and John may have originally been written in Hebrew because it was their native language, whereas a lot of people, or what we're told, the New Testament is in Greek or Aramaic, right? That's kind of like the story. And I thought, wow, that's super interesting. And I just sort of let that marinate. And now I know that conversation with Boris brought me to where I am now. And Joseph Yehuda, I've mentioned before, was the Israeli Jew, author of a book called Hebrew is Greek with a Mask On. And I learned about that on a fantastic documentary video that Dr. Narco Longo of Old World, Florida did, where a Greek woman mentions 2 or 3 times Hebrew is Greek with a mask on and mentions this author. So then I got into that and read about him. And basically, after studying 600 words, he went into it wanting to prove that he went into it to look at how amazing Hebrew is and how Greek came from Hebrew. And what he says he learned in the prologue to the book, because the book's disappeared, of course, and it was close to 800 pages, and it was written in the 1980s. He said, but I was delighted to find out, something like that after studying 600 words and studying the alphabet, that basically Hebrew is Greek with a mask on, and I'm not a Jew. And he was a lawyer, polyglot, Israeli Jew in the 1980s. He said, I realized that I'm actually an Asian Greek. So I think that's super interesting. And I think that's has a lot to do with my passion in looking at language in the Bible. And now, knowing that, and Boris and I talked about this, he was like, logos was the original word for word, okay? It was logos in Greek. And then I'm like, okay, logos, that's logic, right? That's logic, okay? But look at how terrible they are and evil they are. I worked in communications. I designed logos. They have us thinking that logos, or a logo, which is a visual depiction of an idea, of a concept, how dare they use that word, logos, logic, for such a simple, crude representation of communication. That's extremely offensive to me, but it all makes sense because that's what this is all about. It's all words. So I moved from logos to logic. And what is logic? For me, logic is a natural law. If I've learned anything in the Flat Earth movement, if I've learned anything, having been a substitute teacher in a daycare with no masks, and the parents were first responders in the peak of COVID, and not one case of COVID. There was no COVID, and we did not use masks. And now today, leadership is encouraging parents to inject their children with a vaccine for something they don't need. And some, albeit hopefully very few, but some are dying. Pfizer said that 3 in 100 died within 3 months of being injected when they had to, by law, publish their papers, 2022, of their research. So for me, logic is natural law, and that means what I can observe and what I can understand. And I have done a salt rock electricity experiment, and I found that it is achievable, electricity through salt. And I'm like kind of uncomfortable because people are kind of walking by and I feel stupid, but I'm just right now praying that I'm speaking to Zach. And if I'm not, I'm hoping that Zach will watch this at some point. Okay, I'm gonna now look at the comments. Yes, I think cymatics, from what I understand, is that, the shapes that are made through sound in nature. Does it include everything? I think so. It's not just sand, right? And if it's sand, that means because maybe it has iron in it, and the base of all metals is, from what I'm understanding, is iron. And that iron is extracted or transformed. It's not an easy process. It takes time, and you have to sift through it. And so that's why I question if our bodies were born with metals or if we're consuming them. I was looking today at the label. I researched the Himalayas salt, right? The sea salt. Okay, first of all, there's no ocean there, right? It is mineral salt taken from a mountain. Not so close to the Himalaya that you're thinking of. This is in Pakistan. And I've met 2 men from Pakistan who told me that they are, that they eat salt that is gray or black, which is the salt that I brought to the Flattoberfest from the 10th largest salt mine in the world in Zipaquirá. So, and I talked to 2 different men from Pakistan. One was an engineer who'd studied in the United States who was sitting beside me in a fancy cafe in Barcelona and saw my salt and we started talking. And then the other was a guy who was selling flowers in a smaller town in Spain and who was Pakistani and also over 40 years old. And he said, yeah, I grew up on black salt. Okay. So all this to say has a lot to do with periodic table of elements, but I also want to kind of drop in here that what I'm starting to see is that there is a lot to do with the desire to make white good and anything that's not white, not good. Okay, so that's, for instance, salt is not naturally white except from the ocean, and it's not even naturally white. It's an opal-ish kind of tone, okay? Most of the salt that comes from mines in the world from my research is gray. Now, I saw some pictures of really pretty gray and pink, and then I saw what they call the Himalaya sea salt pink. Okay, but I just visited the salt marshes in southern France, and that was very interesting because I observed the pink salt, and then you look to your left and there's 2 big mountains of white salt, and the pink's gone. And I got a couple of stories from different people, a woman who's a salt expert who sells salt from around the world, and then just the guy who worked there, and we talked to everybody. And I don't know how I really have a straight answer, but there's a plankton that is eaten that there's a plankton that exists in the seawater that then converts, that somehow by changing like the locks of the water, that's the way I understand it, and I'm gonna show you the map next time about this, that from us walking through this, and that the salt hardens out of the water, or it keeps getting shallower, and it does come out pinkish, coralish color, okay? I saw it, we stood on it, we walked on it, I have videos of it, there's pictures. And then that gets scraped up, and then it's put into this processing plant. Now, One woman told us, well, with the sun, that pink goes away. Okay, that's interesting. And what's super interesting is that flamingos are that color from this plankton, they say, or from the food that they eat that's from this plankton when they live in areas near where salt is being harvested. I've been to a harvesting in La Guajira on the Atlantic coast of Colombia when I worked on a project for the US government that was for bleach, because this is another big part of it. The only source of chlorine and the only source of sodium is salt. And if I'm wrong, please tell me. But I have been researching this, and there is no other source of chlorine, and there's no other source of sodium. But they tell us that we should have a low sodium diet, but we should swim in pools with chlorine, and we should clean our house with chlorinated products like bleach or Fabulosa or any of these terrible products that are, again, toxins. So that's really where I got onto the periodic table of elements, was when I learned that in Colombia, fluoride is not only in the municipality water, but it is also in city water. It's also added to salt. And I find that appalling. And that's when I started getting into the periodic table of elements, because then people say, well, there's naturally occurring fluoride. I don't believe so. No one's been able to convince me of that. I do not believe so, and I know that's a belief, but you've got to prove to me. There's no proof that fluoride is naturally occurring. So why are they putting it in our water, in our salt? Well, because these brotherhoods, these clubs, secret societies around the world that work together, they can't just throw away the fluoride. They have to do something with it, because if they put it in the river or they put it in the land, that's against the law in most of the world. So what they do is they sell it to their crony friends that are in government positions under the guise of it being good for your teeth, which we know it's not. Please look up right now, Google Harvard neurotoxin fluoride 2012. And Zach, if you're still here, beautiful, thank you. You probably know all of this stuff, but I just feel like we have to just keep talking and repeating and talking and repeating, because a lot of people are just now coming out. And I didn't know about the fluoride thing. I didn't know until 2020, late 2020, and I stopped using the toothpaste. And then I learned about the water and the salt thing in 2022. And then that's why I got into salt, because I thought, well, shit, if they're poisoning the salt, and the salt must be really good, must be important for health, because that's what they do. This is what they do. They want to depopulate, right? But we can survive this, and we can come out the other side. And I'm in that. And I want to live to 150 years old. And I believe that is by removing toxins and speaking truth and sun gazing and grounding and consuming pure salt. And I got to go. My kids are coming. Thank you.